In a world filled with heroes and villains, who knew that the most drama could still come from family? Many of My Hero Academia's most dramatic reveals and key moments of character development stem from complicated family dynamics. Perhaps one of the biggest ongoing family mysteries in the series is that of our protagonist Izuku Midoriya's father, or rather, lack thereof. The man known as Hisashi Midoriya has been largely absent from the narrative and his son's life. We only know his quirk, a mid-tier fire-breathing one, and the fact that he is abroad doing business. It has now been 4 years since Horikoshi teased the official reveal at San Diego Comic-Con. While readers wait for Deku's father to make his debut, a rather interesting theory has made its way through the fanbase. That perhaps Deku's father has been hiding in plain sight, and doing so as the primary antagonist of the story, All for One. While this may be fans extrapolating from Horikoshi's known love for the Star Wars franchise, there is quite a bit of evidence throughout the series that supports this theory. So with the series slated to end within the next year, there is no time left present to explain why the All for One is Deku's father theory has gained so much traction. But before we go any further, this video is sponsored by Bloodline Heroes of Lithis on Android and iOS. Bloodline Heroes of Lithis is a strategic card-based RPG, the likes of which I have never seen before. This traditional Western fantasy 3D game with realistic graphics not only allows you to collect champions and build kingdoms, but boasts the incredibly unique Air system. This allows you to build the intimacy between various different companions from a multitude of incredible fantasy races and create whole new bloodlines between them thanks to the Marry feature. With this, you can create your own unique combination of any 5 powerful abilities out of dozens of traits to suit your own gameplay needs. The possibilities are truly endless here. The higher the intimacy between companions, the more powerful their offspring will be. And for convenience sake, you can even freely switch the genders of your companions. The gameplay controls for this game are very easy to use, so really and truly, you can just jump into things and begin your conquest immediately. Speaking of which, you'll want to begin playing for free as soon as possible by using our link in the description or by scanning the QR code on screen to get access to the Dragonborn and Lycan clans. If you're a fan of werewolves, you'll love these guys. You will additionally obtain your very own half Dragonborn, half Demigod heir for free. And that is one of the strongest merged bloodlines in the game. Oh, and did I mention, you will also receive 1 redeemable champion token that will allow you to unlock a random bloodline, 100,000 gold, oh, and 100 diamonds. Well, now you know how great of an opportunity this really is. Thanks to Bloodline Heroes of Lithis for supporting the channel, but now, back to the topic at hand. Fatherless behavior. Shonen protagonists lacking or losing the presence of their biological father is nothing new. Whether it be from patricide, like Light Yagami, a training arc style chase like Gon Freaks, or an actual international business trip like Josuke Higashikata. Fathers are simply not necessary in many shonen. Most of the time, including in My Hero Academia, a mentor eventually becomes the father figure to our main character. In a genre where the hero's journey and self-discovery is the heart of the narrative, the mentor father figure has a more important role in the story than a partially absent father. All Might has served his role as Deku's stand-in parent effectively, if we don't include the reckless child endangerment, to the point where Shoto Todoroki is compelled to ask if Deku is All Might's secret love child. Hell, All Might even makes a surrogate child a bento box before he goes on a solo vigilante mission. Sounds like fatherly love to me. But this begs the question, why give Hisashi Midoriya a name and an identity if he is going to be non-existent in Deku's life? We'll explain the importance of teasing a character reveal later on in the video, but also, Horikoshi is yet to fully set up a character and not have at least a bit of payoff. Toyo Todoroki's drawn-out reveal is a prime example. But a father reveal with build-up as long as this one seems like it is playing into a popular shonen father subtrope within the disappearing dad trope. There isn't exactly an official name for this trope, so we will tentatively name it Accidental Nepotism Baby. It is typically used as an explanation for why a protagonist is both fatherless and incredibly powerful. The reason why a father is absent from their child's life is because they hold immense power that makes them either extremely famous or infamous. They purposefully separate themselves from their family to protect them, an example being Grisha Yeager from Attack on Titan. Or because a family life would be inconvenient, like Luffy's dad Dragon in One Piece. All for One, the notorious villain he is, probably fits into the latter category because trying to become a supreme overlord and being a present father just don't go together. Based on how he treated his brother and his protege, All for One as a family man feels completely unrealistic. Honestly, I think All for One settling down in the first place would have been a ruse to get the heroes off his back. Inko has proven time and time again that she is incredibly empathetic. So if All for One gave her a little sob story, she'd take him in. I doubt a child, or rather a child with his DNA, was anywhere in his plan, which would explain his swift departure from the Midoriya household. The origin story. Within the story itself, the timeline of Deku's early life and the downfall of All for One line up suspiciously well. We don't know how present Deku's father was in his early life, but by the time his son turned 5, he was out of the picture. It seems Deku knows next to nothing about his father because he is such a non-presence in his life. The kid who can recite the minute details of every major pro hero's quirk knows zero details about his biological father. We'll get into the possible reasons behind All For One wants to keep his biological son at arm's length later on though. His one and only mention in the entire series thus far is by Inko in a doctor's office when her son is diagnosed as quirkless. Considering the many times Deku has ended up in the hospital after a battle, Hisashi Midoriya's name never coming up is a bit suspicious. Either Deku never thought to add his father to his emergency contacts, or Hisashi did not want to be contacted. To me, the most plausible explanation is simply All For One being away from Inko and their son for over a decade. Inko believes her husband is on international business and Deku probably hasn't spoken a full sentence to his father. But perhaps the best link between Hisashi's indefinite absence and the theory that All For One is Deku's father is his current health status. The battle that wounded All Might and put his arch nemesis on life support happened when Deku was around 10 years old. It could very well be that this was the final reason that All For One cut contact with the Midoriyas. With his face completely disfigured and his body dependent on various life support systems, there was really no way he could ever come back. Hisashi's indefinitely long business trip would simply be a lie for poor Inko, who doesn't know she birthed a villain's child. From the very limited information we have about both the unconfirmed Hisashi Midoriya and All For One before he became a hybrid of man and machine, there is a bit of overlapping information. First is his name. Horikoshi loves picking names that align with a character's personality or their quirk. For example, All For One's given last name, Shigaraki, contains characters for death and grip, which is his protege Tomura Shigaraki's quirk. Meanwhile, Hisashi loosely translates to a long time ago. While this is an obvious play on Deku's father not being present in his life, it also feels like a hint towards his father's identity. A long time ago can also refer to Hisashi existing for a long time, a double meaning that also points at a potential quirk he has. All For One acquired the quirk Life Force, which essentially grants him a supernaturally long life. Although Deku does primarily resemble and act like his mother, a pre-life support All For One also shares some characteristics with his alleged son. Physically, there's not a ton to go off since All For One's face has either been partially obscured or completely removed, but it seems like the two share similar hairstyles and builds. A recent Weekly Shonen Jump cover highlights this a little more, and All For One seems to be moving in to embrace Deku. Obviously, personality traits aren't genetically inherited, but Deku and All For One do share similar interests and personality quirks as well. They're both obsessed with the science of quirks, spending hours upon hours of research studying the minute details of pro heroes. Both are also prone to going on rambling monologues about strategizing and using their quirks and those of their allies to their advantage, though Deku's are played for laughs, while All For One's are more aligned with evil monologues. The similarities might seem coincidental, but they're still important to consider in deducing the connection between All For One and Deku. And just as importantly, if you want more My Hero Academia content, be sure to subscribe to the channel with notifications on so you never miss an upload, and smash that like button for some plot run today. Deku's body. All For One's suspected parentage would also explain the nuances in Deku's anatomy. First, it provides several explanations for why Deku might have been labeled quirkless. As a young child, Deku's family doctor, who just so happened to be All For One's closest confidant, the nefarious Dr. Garaki, diagnosed his quirklessness because he had an extra joint in his fifth toe. The vestigial joint is a biological marker of no powers. If Deku was indeed born without a quirk, the statistics of two 4th generation quirk users producing him are incredibly low. This is why Deku is probably the last wielder of One For All. It's not possible for a quirkless child to be born of two 4th gen users. Yugo Oyama is a prime example, but it is still low. However, someone born from a 4th generation quirk user and a 1st generation quirk user would statistically have a higher chance of being born quirkless. This could explain the additional joint in Deku's pinky toe, but I'll get into why that evidence is a bit sketchy later on in the video. I think All For One is a quirk simply too powerful to be skipped in the gene pool though, and his wielder likely knows this as well. If Deku is All For One's child, then there is a chance he might have inherited a quirk that was not similar to the mid-tier fire-breathing Inko believes her husband has. Deku's birth would be a liability to All For One's carefully constructed ruse. We have seen All For One dispatch of other quirk users, like 9 who he willingly gave a modified version of All For One, that were a potential threat to his malicious plan of world domination. An unplanned user of All For One would throw a wrench in his plans, especially since he would have a young, angry, and traumatized Tenko Shimura as his ward by the time Deku was born. Removing his quirk is the perfect marriage of ensuring All For One's parentage is never revealed. Regardless of how Deku ended up without a quirk, his ability to adapt to One For All is uncannily powerful. Because his body registers as lacking a pre-existing quirk, he is able to escape the premature death and bodily decay the first 7 One For All users had. But even compared to his mentor, Deku's grasp on his new quirk is unprecedentedly strong. And when I say new, I do mean new. The entire manga has taken place in about 10 months. Yue would have been reaching the end of the school year during the war arc. That means Deku was not only acquired, but for the most part mastered One for All in under a year. He can also directly communicate with the 7 deceased users of One for All in the Vestige world. For reference, All Might was also a quirkless individual before being gifted One for All, and was never able to directly contact all the previous users in the 4 decades he held the power. While Deku had to go through the massive learning curve of breaking every limb several times, he had an uncanny mental connection with the previous wielders, especially the first user, Yoichi Shigaraki. Perhaps it's because he is the first user of One for All and has spent the most time in the Vestige world, but considering All Might wasn't able to make direct contact with Yoichi, I think there is another element at play. It almost feels like there's an innate connection between Yoichi and Deku, something beyond a mentor-mentee relationship that is more akin to Hikage Shinomori and En, the 4th and 6th users respectively. Yoichi is much softer and more open with Deku than all the other users, almost as if he can sense a deep relationship between the two. Perhaps he feels a familial connection that the newest member of the One for All ranks is unaware of. Dr. Garaki. But the largest piece of evidence for the All for One is Deku's father theory does not involve Deku, Inko, or even All for One. It comes from Dr. Kyudai Garaki. While he has gained a lot more notoriety in the manga since the My Villain Academia arc, Horikoshi himself confirmed that Garaki has been around from the start. As previously stated, the doctor that told Deku he was quirkless, the older, balding man with the giant mustache, yeah, that was Dr. Garaki, the man responsible for Nomu's as well as Shigaraki and Nine's modifications to inherit All for One. At this doctor's appointment, Inko and Garaki seem to be sort of familiar with each other. I'd wagered that at the bare minimum, Garaki served as Deku's doctor as a child, meaning that Garaki has been spying on Deku since around the age of 1 or 2. Hypothetically, if Garaki had been interacting with Deku for a few years, then All for One would have known. We can then guess that before diagnosing Deku as quirkless, Garaki would be informed that he is All for One's son. If we follow this line of reasoning, I think that the X-ray of Deku's foot could absolutely be faked or modified, especially if All for One removed Deku's quirk at birth. For extra measure, Garaki also sent one of his own grandchildren to spy on and bully Deku while they were both in elementary school. Some years later, Garaki turned his grandchild, or at least embedded a copy of his quirk into the winged Nomu that was taken hostage by Endeavor during the battle with the hero killer, Stain. Because Nomu retains some memories of their previous selves, and or their quirks retain aspects of the original user's soul, this specific violation of nature seems to blatantly target Deku because it remembered bullying the young hero back in elementary school. So for the better part of a decade, it seems like Dr. Garaki has been meddling in Deku's life directly and indirectly. But why would All for One and Dr. Garaki want to meddle with the life of a random quirkless kid? All other signs point to All for One trying not to interact with this possible child, so why would he place such an emphasis on trying to ruin his life? Well, we now know that Dr. Garaki and All for One have a long legacy of picking up broken children to rehabilitate in their own twisted way. It's how Tenko Shimura became Tomura Shigaraki. It almost happened to Toyo Todoroki after he deep-fried himself on Sekoto Peak. It also happened to at least dozens of other children at Dr. Garaki's makeshift hospital. It could be argued that Himiko Toga fits into this category as well. The two find broken children and either groom them into becoming villains or turn them into Nomu if they are not powerful enough. So making Deku feel completely powerless would make him vulnerable to the joining of villains. It's a long haul plan, but in my mind, this makes sense. First, tell a child that presumably idolizes the pro heroes that he is quirkless, thus stripping his dreams away from him. Then have the same child get bullied severely for his entire schooling. By the time he's in his late teens, the child is so disillusioned by hero society that convincing him to destroy it is incredibly easy. This is when Garaki and All for One slide in, revealing their identities to the angry and emotionally broken Deku, and recruit him to end hero society and shape it in his own father's image. This Emperor Palpatine move is just one example of how Star Wars inspired this theory is, but we'll get into that later. Now this plan definitely can't work anymore since fate allowed Deku to meet All Might and inherit One for All. And as such, All for One and Garaki now have to adjust accordingly. This is where the UA traitor Oyama comes in. Again, we know that Garaki and All for One are not above using children as spies. Deploying Oyama as the rat to gain intel on Deku makes even more sense if we add the layer of Deku being All for One's child. Plot potential. From a narrative standpoint, All for One being Deku's father provides a myriad of interesting layers to the end of the series. Obviously, having an established character reveal themselves as Deku's absentee father would make more sense than writing a new character at the 11th hour. Horikoshi has written a few new characters recently, like Lady Nagan and Star and Stripe, but their narrative purpose is much different than Hisashi Midoriya. Those two were simply newer, more powerful obstacles for Deku and Shigaraki to face, as well as new perspectives on hero society. Hisashi Midoriya is an overarching mystery that has been hanging over the series since its inception. Having such a huge figure, especially a notorious villain as Deku's father, would seem more impactful. As I said before, Horikoshi is a massive Star Wars fan and has already included several references to the sci-fi juggernaut. I'd argue that All For One himself is a giant homage to Darth Vader, especially with his villain costume and penchant for killing children. If All For One is the Darth Vader of the series, Deku and All Might are Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi. The two have followed the basic student-mentor format in a similar way to their Jedi predecessors. The inevitable final fight between the two would have some Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker undertones, even if the two aren't related. Although making them father and son would allow for a cooler final fight in my opinion. From the way Deku and All For One have been set up to parallel probably the most dramatic father reveal in media history, I wouldn't be shocked if Horikoshi made the largest Star Wars homage in My Hero Academia a Darth Vader style revelation. But apart from homages and narrative structure, making All For One related to Deku would add more layers to the inevitable final battle of the series. Of course, the Darth Vader Luke Skywalker parallels would be cool for the fight between Deku and All For One, but there's another final battle that would have additional details added with the reveal. Deku versus Tomura Shigaraki. Regardless of whether Deku is All For One's child or not, seeing an all-out brawl between the fully realized All For One and One For All at their peak potential is going to be iconic. But these two have been set up as near-perfect narrative foils since Shigaraki's introduction. From their quirks to their origin stories, these two are written to be two sides of the same coin. Both have a quirk that was initially destructive to both themselves and others, and both were horrifically mistreated as children. Even Deku himself recognizes that Shigaraki is simply an abused child under all his murderous rage, and that is why he refuses Shimura Nana's request to kill him. If Deku is revealed to be All For One's son, I think it would add even more nuance to the dynamic between the two. Deku would be All For One's biological child that he abandoned and was unable to create in his image, while Shigaraki is All For One's adopted child and the grandson of a pro-hero molded into his vessel and perfect image. One is a child born of his DNA, and the other is a child born of his ideology. So not only are they narrative foils, but they would share a tenuous connection through All For One. I'd imagine that Deku learning he is the son of Shigaraki's mentor would make him feel worse for his opponent, because if All For One decided to make a baby Izuku his protege, then he would have been in Shigaraki's place and gone through the actual psychological torture he had. I think learning his father's origin would make him even more determined to save the remnants left in Tenko Shimura instead of killing him. A surprise father reveal would be an amazing decision from a narrative standpoint, and a perfect zenith to the continuous parallels between Shigaraki and Deku. And that's all the hints, subtle and outright, that My Hero Academia has given us about Deku's father possibly being All For One. With the series ending in the next year or so, who knows how many more hints will drop before the long-awaited reveal. But what do you think? Leave us a comment below with any evidence you think we might have missed, or any other theories you have about Deku's mysterious father. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching, and have an awesome day. I love you.